Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. I was extremely excited to see this film. I am a huge fan of his body of work. I loved Interstellar, even though I acknowledge that there were many things wrong with that film that prevent it from being a true masterpiece, many things that prevent me from going back to watch it now. So how does Dunkirk compare to Interstellar? I'll tell you in a few seconds.
The enemy tanks have stopped.
Why?
Why waste precious tanks when they can pick us off from the air like fish in a barrel?
Dunkirk is very intense. It is very tense. It is a long, drawn-out, Hitchcockian, Tarantino-like, visceral depiction of war, depicting war as a disaster that strips away anything that might get in the way. The style Nolan used with Dunkirk is very, very similar to Hans Zimmer's style of music, which I would say is taking very basic ideas in terms of melodies and then expanding those to be as giant, as epic as possible without a lot of clutter. Many people would argue that Zimmer's stuff is constantly hitting you over the head, but in terms of musical amounts of melodies, it's not flying all over the place. These are simple ideas that are huge. This is what Nolan does with Dunkirk. And I think it works incredibly well. A lot of people are going to criticize this film, and I've already seen them say that the lack of character development is a problem, the lack of some of the side stories, the more human elements. And Nolan has been criticized in the past of not having a great touch with human actors. And I think that in Interstellar, we saw him trying to inject a bit of a love story was to the detriment of the film. Here in Dunkirk, I think that he was perfectly serving the film and the point of it and the experience that Dunkirk is by not cluttering it with a inconsequential side story. What it does is it replicates the feeling of being in danger. When you are in danger, you don't think about anything except survival. You make sure you can breathe, that you're going to be warm enough, that you're not going to get shot. After all that is taken care of, once you're home safe and sound, then you can start worrying about your lawn and that kind of thing, or who you're going to fall in love with. But this fully depicted what it would feel like to be trapped. The basic premise of the film is based on a historical event in World War II. British and Allied forces, 400,000 of them, I believe, were stranded on the beaches of Dunkirk, which is just separated from Britain by a very narrow channel. The theme of the movie is that they can see home, but seeing it doesn't do anything in terms of actually getting you home. Unfortunately, the Allies were strapped in terms of what they could send to that channel, across the channel to Dunkirk, to extract these soldiers and to evacuate them. So they end up doing an emergency procedure where they activate a civilian flotilla, where they send thousands of merchant ships, pleasure cruisers, steamships, transports, things like that, everyone pulling their weight to bring these soldiers out. If the enemy had gotten to that beach and had taken out the 400,000 soldiers, either as prisoners or murdered them, then the war probably would have been over even before America got involved after Japan bombed them at Pearl Harbor. So this was a very tense moment. And like I was saying, the lack of that character development and the side story, this isn't Pearl Harbor, you're not going to see a love story. This isn't Titanic, where it's about a love story. It is about survival, and nothing gets in the way of that.
There are 400,000 men on this beach.
I would highly recommend seeing this thing in IMAX. The truest IMAX you can find. The one that says 1:143, not the 1:9 ratio. You want it to be nice and tall and fill in that gap. If you can't see it with 70mm film, I didn't. I saw it on a great digital IMAX in Toronto at the Scotiabank Theatre. It's on laser. It had the right ratio. I believe that the ratio on the size of the screen and the crispness of the visuals is more important than seeing on film, where film will give you a more vibrant feeling to it, a more vibrant look to it. I've heard it described as the opening Dunkirk text of white that goes over the black. And digital just looks like white on black. With film, they say that it almost vibrates with intensity. I will probably go seek out one of those showings, but I was extremely happy with this, and I think that that extra height on the top and the bottom is so important. With the way that Nolan uses that, and he does switch from the full top to cropping it down, is used for the flying sequences, which felt like virtual reality. This movie felt like virtual reality, and Nolan, I think, has described that himself. The battle sequences, the long shots over the beach. This movie felt so real, and you felt like you were there. And a huge part of that comes with the intense work that Nolan put into this to have extras. There must have been hundreds of thousands of extras, maybe just tens of thousands of extras, real ships, real planes. There is hardly any CGI in this film, and you can feel it. There's also not a lot of gore or blood in a war movie where there are people dying and featuring and coming to grisly ends. However, Nolan chooses to not make the movie about that, not to make it about blood and gore, but instead leave some of that to the imagination. And I think that does very well. And it also just doesn't distract from it. There's not a big bloody, gory scene to sort of serve as a showpiece like a zombie film might have. This isn't a war movie that has heroes that are saving the day and where the focus goes in on them. Another point I'd like to make about people that criticize this as saying it doesn't have enough character development is that this is an ensemble cast. And without a primary, very obvious candidate for a character to bond with, I felt like every character was in peril and that no character's plight was more important than the war. And that is absolutely right. There are going to be some things that happen to characters in here where if you were in a more traditional movie, you might play up with sappy violins, with a heroic moment or a very sad moment. But in war, when hundreds of thousands of men are trying to survive, there is no time to have a sappy moment for someone that has died, for someone that has had a heroic moment. This is war and this is survival. This is a survival movie. It is extremely intense. If you've ever been to the IMAX and seen not a feature film like, say, Batman or Interstellar in the IMAX, but an actual made-for IMAX movie, they're about 40 minutes long. They're extremely intense. This felt more like that, where Nolan had strung together 3 different IMAX films and interwove them. Now, the interweaving of the 3 narratives is another interesting part of this movie. We know that Nolan loves to mess with time. Memento is a movie that is backwards. Inception is all about time within time and dreams within dreams and reality within reality. It's crazy stuff. Interstellar, lots of great time play on the planet that speeds up time and black holes, wormholes. This one I thought was interesting enough. They didn't hit you over the head with it. And I think it did a really great job of telling the story. One part of the film takes place over a day, one part takes place over just an hour, and the other part takes place over a week. You start to notice as you're going through that he is not messing with, but he's mixing up some of the events in a different order in a way to tell these 3 stories simultaneously, but still give you the illusion of watching them all at the same time. I think it was a brilliant move. As for the score, I've seen some people that have criticized Zimmer's score here very heavily, saying it was relentless, it was too much, it didn't give the movie a chance to breathe. I would say that Zimmer has been accused of that before. Some of the Man of Steel or Batman v Superman with the endless drums, a style that he started maybe 10 years ago using the taiko drums and has now taken over mainline Hollywood AAA big studio movies, where every single movie trailer and movie, the score sounds exactly the same. It's just drum to drum, drum to drum, 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 drum. No melody, no personality. And I'm so glad that Zimmer is now getting away from that. He uses the sound of a ticking watch or a clock, and it's a very delicate, very lush sound, and it perfectly encapsulates this ticking time bomb of the situation. These characters are in a race against time to survive for themselves, for their country, for the free world. And I would say that Zimmer's score doesn't jump out as much as it did, say, in Interstellar, where Interstellar, I thought he had some more memorable tracks, but at least upon my first viewing, I feel like these tracks are more in the background, even though they are very, very consistently present. And Zimmer also loves to imitate what he's seeing on the screen. If you're up in the sky, white clouds of planes, he's going to try to make those violins sound exactly like a plane up in the sky, very high pitches. If there's a great scene with two soldiers carrying another soldier on a stretcher, and he has these two violins that play all just mimicking the cadence of the run of the march, and they go out to be doubled and then they come in to be singular. So I think that it was a fantastically fitting score, and I can understand the criticism if you want something a little less pounding you in the head, but this movie does not let up.
Civilians. We need destroyers. Where are we going?
Dunkirk.
I would highly recommend this movie for somebody who wants to go to the film theater and have an actual experience with it. This is beyond just your typical movie telling. Please, if you want to see this, go see it in IMAX. I would recommend that over the 70 millimeter. You make sure you get those ratios. You are totally going to thank me when you're watching it. If you do love a romance, if you do love more character development, you might not find as much to like here, but I think that there are different movies for different things. And if you want to see a visceral, pounding, tense experience that is the best elements of Hitchcock and Tarantino together, then this is for you. If you saw Interstellar, this will be a great comparison. I loved Interstellar for a few of the moments, the rocket taking off as Matthew McConaughey is driving away from his house, a lot of the space sequences, some of the black hole sequences, but the movie is so long. The dialogue I found a bit ropey, the story a bit ropey and stiff. I didn't like the ending of Interstellar, and it stops me from going back and experiencing it again sort of wholeheartedly. I'd almost like to just make an edit of it that I could watch just the best parts. But I feel like Dunkirk took everything I loved out of Interstellar and just made an entire movie about that, cutting the fat of anything that might get in the way of his vision of what would make this movie a true visceral experience about war like I've never seen it before. This movie's a masterpiece. I give it 5 stars. Go see Dunkirk on the biggest screen with the correct ratio you can find. Bye for now.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender.